Okay, time for another reading from Damnation, the Gothic Game, the novel. And this time we find ourselves in the Great Hall, having enjoyed a sumptuous meal. And the sinister butler, Clove, has some new information for his unsuspecting guests. This is from the point of view of Grayson, the Englishman, who has something of the flash heart about him. And I make no apology for the terrible accents that I'm going to use in this particular reading. Hope you enjoy it. Now that you have dined, some entertainment, Clove announced. Now, perhaps he was imagining things, but Grayson thought he saw the butler glance darkly at the burly henchman as though giving them the silent nod. We will play a parlour game tonight. Each of you will be shown to your room. You will find instructions about our amusing little game there. If you each play along satisfactorily, you will be free to go in the morning. Sounds bally mysterious to me, Grayson said, hoping that his quarters were within seducing distance of the gypsy girls, so that he might suggest pooling their efforts. I do not play along with such parlour tricks, Rasputin announced. Clove levelled his gaze at the Russian, and for a moment the eyes beneath the mop of black hair took on a more sophisticated aspect than previously displayed by the butler. He licked his thin lips. But only one of you may leave. I say, steady on, old chap, Grayson said. What is the meaning of this? Lady Sophia countered. Her voice seemed to have lost some of its resolve. A frisson of fear passed around the dining table, making the guests shiver as though from a cold draught. Only one of us? Sir, kindly explain yourself. Mara's voice too was strained, but she held firm, with a dignity beyond her years. Fine young woman, that one, thought Grayson. Clove simply smiled, those thin lips holding on to their secrets. I refuse to bow to the will of any other. No man may command me, least of all some Romanian lackey, Rasputin bellowed, and pushing his chair back so violently as he stood up, it nearly toppled over. Out of my way. As the holy man strode toward the door, Clove nodded to the attendants who snapped into position, blocking his exit from the room. Rasputin appeared to measure them up, and then turned on his heel, protesting as he strode instead to the largest of the arched windows on the other side of the hall. I will swim across the moat to freedom if I have to. Please be our guest, Clove said, before nodding to his men again, quite openly this time. They closed in around Rasputin, seizing him in their strong arms. The outraged Russian lashed out at them, his long hair flapping like a war banner on a battlefield, but they were too many and too strong for him. Grayson and the women alike gasped at what they saw next. One of the attendants reached out and unfastened the huge leaded window, flinging it open wide. Shock then registered on Rasputin's face as the men lifted him from his feet. Without any word of warning, they hurled him out of the window, through which he plummeted backwards. Mara rushed over to the window, careless of the threat of the brutes who stood there admiring their grim handiwork. An almighty splash erupted far below as Rasputin hit the water. Grayson finished his glass of port to steady his nerves. Then he ambled over to the window, cautious of the attendants who stood there panting from their murderous exertions. He looked down and realized just how far the Russian had fallen. Ripples on the dark surface marked the spot where he had entered the cold murk. Help him, you monsters, he will drown. Mara's cry was one of complete empathy for the fallen holy man. The old fellow had certainly endeared himself to her during their card game aboard the train. Grayson looked to Rasputin's other dalliance and found Lady Sophia's countenance to be quite pale. He sidled closer to her so that he might be the one to catch her if she should faint. Then Mara screamed, and Grayson looked down from the window again to see Rasputin reappear within the moat. His dark face broke the surface of the water, his skin plastered with fronds of black hair like water weeds. By gad, Grayson exclaimed. Chap, survive! He watched as the poor fellow opened his mouth, gaping wide, taking air into his shocked lungs, while moving his arms in circles to keep himself afloat. He appeared injured in some considerable distress. His right arm, Grayson noted, was moving less than the left, the Russian's drenched garment torn all about it. Those dark eyes looked up at the window pointedly, as though conveying silent curses to the watchers above. Then he wheeled around in the drink and began swimming, awkwardly due to his injured arm, towards the water's edge. The side of the moat was sheer and looked damnably slippery to boot. A fellow would have to be spring-heeled Jack to scale it, if at all. Then Grayson realized the extent of Rasputin's plan. He was swimming diagonally across the dark channel of the moat towards the mechanism of the drawbridge. Even though the bridge was shut, the huge chains that powered it hung tantalizingly above the surface of the water. The fellow was made of stern stuff, that much was certain, but the distance from water to chain looked considerable. And then there was the not insignificant matter of the man's injured arm to take into consideration. It was a rum business, survival against those odds. All things considered, and with no offence implied, Grayson thought, I might not be betting in this chap's favour. Grayson heard a thin, mocking cackle, which roused him from his thoughts. He saw quiet delight on Clove's face as he watched Rasputin's efforts. That quick tongue licked at those thin lips once more, and Grayson detected an unsavoury hunger within the gesture. I say, something else is wrong here, he thought. By the pricking of my thumbs, very wrong indeed. And no sooner had he thought it, Grayson saw the surface of the water shift darkly, mere feet away from Rasputin's legs. Seemingly oblivious to this threat, the Russian was paddling bravely on toward shore. The water must be freezing, and for this alone Grayson admired the fellow's resolve. But that disturbance in the water was moving toward Rasputin and picking up speed. Mara gasped, another scream dying in her throat. Lady Sophia's eyes widened, bulging in denial at nature's transgression playing out before her in the moat below. The water swelled beneath Rasputin, rising wave-like, and the holy man rose too, his body lifted slightly by the swell, and perversely closer to shore, before it enveloped him utterly in its unfathomable wet blackness. Grayson caught one last glimpse of Rasputin's pained visage, a profile of a drowning man before it was dragged under by some unseen force. All but one hand disappeared beneath the water. Rasputin's hand clawed at the unforgiving surface, a devastatingly futile gesture against the inevitable. And then the hand too was gone, lost beneath the fatal wave, which rolled back, erasing all trace that there had been a human being there just moments ago.